Hello again, and welcome to Haiku Talk with me, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. Today's episode, which is episode 2, we're going to go to the spring-summer issue of Frogpond and talk about a poem by Julie Schwerin, titled His Hands Come to Rest. And by title, I'm just using the first line of the haiku. Something you should know and you will learn over time is that haiku and senryu are untitled poems. Pretty much, you've got a really short, compact time to get your poem across to somebody. And if you have to title your haiku or your senryu, then your poem's not working hard enough to get what it needs to do done. So keep that in mind. So if you're working on your own work and you're suddenly notice that you're titling your individual haiku, two things can happen. One, I would say perhaps you're really trying to write a short poem, and there's nothing wrong with that. Short poems are awesome, and you should embrace any form that you'd like, and perhaps it's a short form free verse poem that would have a title. And if that's the case, try reworking the poem a little bit to get at what you're really after. But if you're writing a haiku, then really look at that first line and try to figure out really look at that title to figure out what it's trying to do and see, how do I incorporate that into the rest of the poem? Because if you pick up any journal these days, and well, pretty much going back 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of contemporary English language haiku, and haiku in other languages as well, you will not see titles on the works. So if you're serious about this form and you're really wanting to know how it works and how to write them, remove your titles and try to incorporate that within the poem itself if it is important. Otherwise, consider writing a short poem. So, without further ado, we'll get to this haiku. Okay, Julie's poem goes like this. His hand comes to rest where her breast used to be, nesting doves. His hand comes to rest where her breast used to be, nesting doves. Now, this is a very deep and moving and powerful poem. And what it's able to convey in 13 words is absolutely stunning. 13 words. Now, on a high level, this poem does use the fragment and phrase structure, just as Brian Rickards did in our first episode. In this case, Julie has switched it up so that the fragment is at the end and the phrase comes first. So the phrase is, his hand comes to rest where her breast used to be. And the fragment is nesting doves. Now, the usage of fragment and phrase has to do with juxtapositions, and this is a main key component to how haiku work. And a haiku is a juxtaposition of two images that sometimes are connected together, sometimes are not. But when placed together side by side, the two pieces pop and become more than the sum of their parts. They take the poem and give it its aha moment, if you will. And by and large, the fragment and phrases is the most, it is one of the things that underpins a haiku across the board. There are people that are working on different, trying to stretch that a little bit, trying to decompress it a little bit, but by and large, that's the thing that you see over and over and over and over again. And no matter how much you whittle it down or how hard you try to deconstruct it, at its core, that juxtaposition is really where the magic happens. And Julie is, this is a very weighty, heavy work. And So that first line, we'll go through this line by line like we did with Brian's. That first line is, his hand comes to rest. And with any poem, first lines, or in any story, first lines are very important. In the haiku, because they're so short, that first line really is kind of the make or break moment of the poem. If you're put off by that first line, chances are the reader is not going to continue to read the poem, even if it's short, or not care about the poem, even if it's short. So it has to be engaging. It has to pique your interest and be interesting. And in this case, his hand comes to rest. It brings you in to a moment that's happening where somebody is seeing a hand come to rest. And it's not just a hand, but it's his hand coming to rest. And we don't know where it's coming to rest. We don't know any more of the context of the scene. So I find myself being really compelled to continue forward. It comes to rest where? His hand. What's the relationship to this hand coming to rest on something? We have no idea where it's going to go. But as we find out, this becomes the phrase of the poem. So we go right into line 2, where her breast used to be. So his hand comes to rest where her breast used to be. Man, heavy. And also speaks to a tremendous closeness between the his and the her in this poem. Because there's a closeness here. Not every hand is going to come to rest on a place where a breast used to be. That connection, that relationship between the his and the her in this poem is very close. And the her is very vulnerable, having once had a breast, now lost that breast. And you also have a rhyme between lines 1 and 2 with rest and breast, which is nice because that's where the resting of the hand happens to be, where the breast used to be. Rest, breast is a good tie-in. It's a good use of rhyme. Rhyming can happen in haiku as long as it's not a distraction and as long as it serves the purpose of the poem. And for me personally, that's always the underlining rule of anything. And you can use anything as long as it serves the poem and is not a distraction. It doesn't call attention to itself as a trick that you're using or as a technique that, hey, you're trying this out and you're really winking at the camera, winking at the reader. In this case, no, it's where the breast, and not only on the breast, but it's where the breast used to be. His hand comes to rest where her breast used to be. Now, the idea of something where something used to be is a little snippet of a poem, of a line that the more you read in haiku, the more you might see that used to be used again and again by different poets in different contexts. I know I've used it a number of times myself. And what's interesting about haiku is that they are short, and in some forms of writing, you would be like, in that short of poem, you don't really want to reuse somebody else's bits, somebody else's line, somebody else's sentiment, because in other forms of writing, originality is the forefront. You always want your own original take on something, and this might be like, well, you're ripping somebody off, or you're not smart enough to come up with your own line or your own image, but that's okay in haiku. Very much like maybe a musician, you might hear phrases of different songs that might appear in a track, or even in painting, where you might see a composition be reused by another person in a different way, in their own way. In haiku, you see similar lines being reused by different poets all the time, and I find that very, very exciting and enticing, and it kind of goes with this idea that all literature is a conversation, a human conversation, the great conversation of letters, as I dramatically like to call it. And it's a conversation we've been having with ourselves as a species since we've learned to talk, since we gathered around campfires to share our stories, since we've been painting in cave walls, since we've been figuring out how to express ourselves beyond the mere getting through a day of chores and tasks. When we realize that there's a real beauty and real value in communicating what it's like, what it means to be human. And could there be any more humanity in these first two lines? His hand comes to rest where her breast used to be. And that takes us to the fragment of the poem, line 3, which is nesting doves. Now, what does that do? Now, nesting doves, it ties it back to nature at large. And it also, nesting doves mate for life. So suddenly now we're having this connection through another species that helps underline the relationship that was built in the his and the her in lines 1 and 2. And now we're seeing the implied suggestion here by using nesting doves is that these two, the his and her, are life mates. They are paired for life. And that underscores the fact that his hand probably rested on her breast when she still had it before it was removed. And that means that underscores the relationship that's there, and the time and the decision and the hurt and the scaring and then the perseverance and the coming out, the living onness of this relationship between the two. Because if you've been in a serious relationship, a marriage or long-term relationship, or you've watched parents, grandparents, or whatever, you know that life is full of challenges, good and bad. And like this nesting doves, this his and the her and this poem in this one moment convey so tenderly, so beautifully, that lifelong love for one another and what it means to be with somebody and have somebody be with you to go through some life-changing, life-threatening, life-altering events. Neither one of them are the same after that. But yet, his hand still goes there. And you have to imagine, in my mind anyway, that it's a very tender, warm moment that hand goes there and it's still there. And that person that reaching out, the him reaching out to the her, that she is still there. It's just brilliant. 13 words. 13 words. Julie Schwerin, fantastic. Again, this comes from Frogpond, which is the journal for the Haiku Society of America. In our first episode, we had a poem from the British Haiku Society. And if you're out there looking for more work, good work to sink your teeth into, check out the Haiku Society of America. You can subscribe. You can always get samples of the poems in each issue that comes out. But think about becoming a member. It's a great organization. I've been a member for years. And this is one of, about, 150, 200 poems that made the cut for this issue. And it just floors me. And, this is why this form is more than just a 575 template, more than just a joke. It really means something and can convey something beautiful, meaningful, and deep. And as we explore through this channel, poem after poem after poem, we're going to see a wide variety of different types of pieces, some funny, some light, some purely observational, and some, like this one, that gets into the life and death heart of what it means to be alive and love and paired with somebody. And again, the juxtapositioning that against the nesting doves, again, just like in the previous issue or episode, it's that idea that, we're the nesting doves weather storms just like humans do. They stay together. And, again, we're alive on this planet. We all have a right to be here. All have just as much of a right to be here as anything else. And just, as Julie's poem here is, we continue to celebrate that we are still here, and that we can move on with going through tremendous struggles and hardship. And I don't know anybody that hasn't been touched by cancer in one way or the other. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe to this channel to get notifications when things, new issues come up or new episodes come up. And until next time, thanks.